My brother, never nana, one a monster, oh no lele. Anything they plan against me, oh no lele. Nafugo my defender, oh. That's your counterpart for me today, she oh no lele.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I present to you No Lele by Great Man, and today we're going to do the mix and blah, blah, blah. An amazing song as you can hear, and today we are going to do the mix and master breakdown for this record. So I'm going to walk you through my process, and hopefully you can pick up one or two things you can use for your own mix. So let's jump right into this very quickly. As you can see, I just came back from somewhere and I'm wearing suits, so yeah. So as usual, my process is the same, and I like to start with session organization. As you can see, I've organized the session just the way I like it. Drums, bass, melodies, and vocals, lead and background vocals essentially. And if we go straight to the drums, first thing I'm starting with is gain staging. I did a whole video about gain staging, and that's a deep dive into understanding how gain staging works. But essentially, what I'm doing here is making sure that each and every track in this mix is not clipping, and making sure we have good enough headroom to start with. For example, if we look at this kick, you see that we are picking at minus 16.7 dB, which is solid. And then the next plugin we have here is the catch-off EQ. And I'm doing a low shelf, attenuating up to minus 12 dB around 30 Hz to keep that kick very tight. I do think low shelf sounds very good for kick. I've said this many times. And if we look down the rest of the drums, you'll see that the process is the same, right? Gain staging and using EQ to carve out space for each element of the mix. Although if we look at this loop right here, 3 dB boost around 3.7K to add some presence to the drum loop. Essentially, to bring some more attention to the rim there, right?
Deliver.
Yeah, what else are we doing? I'm doing a chorus send here. What's this? Okay, so we have another drum loop, and what I'm doing with this, apart from the trim plugin and carving out space with the catch-off EQ, is doing a send to my chorus bus, which has the doubler. And what I'm doing with this is very simple. I'm trying to send some more information to the side so that this particular drum loop can surround the rest of the drums, you know, kind of give it more presence and just make everything sound fuller. I'm going to bypass the chorus effect and put it back on so we can see the difference that this is making without the chorus, right? And then with the chorus, you can see that it immediately feels bigger. And with the rest of the drums, yeah, very nice. It gives it a little bit more presence, essentially.
Deliver.
And I don't think I'm doing anything else that's special. Once I've done my gain staging, I'll do my balancing, which means I will set the levels of each individual element to what I think works for the record, like a rough mix or a static mix. And then once I'm satisfied with that, then I will route all the drums to the drum bus where I'm doing the compression, as well as the parallel compression bus where I'm doing my parallel compression. And then one other thing I like to do is side chaining the kick to the bass. So as you can see, I have my sidechain bus here, and this is feeding the neutron compressor on the bass. But let's look at the compression for the drums real quick. Let's see what we're doing now. Almost getting to 1 dB of gain reduction. That's typically what I like to do, and I think that usually just works to glue the drums together. And I typically use this as both a bit of a glue tool and an amplification tool, so which means compression around 1 dB to glue the drums together, and I use the gain knob to add the amount of gain that I think works for the mix. Let's look at the bass processing real quick. As usual, we're starting with gain staging, making sure we have enough headroom, and we are currently picking at minus 7.3 dB EQ here. I'm also doing a low shelf, 30 Hz with a minus 12 dB attenuation, and some dynamic EQ here to target some resonant frequencies that I was hearing on the bass. There was just a bit of ringing there that was competing with some of the melodies, so I took those out. And then we have the neutron compressor here, which I'm using to do sidechain compression, essentially making sure that every time the kick hits, the bass ducks just a little bit. You can see that, right? And then we have one more compressor here, which is the MV2, and I'm using this to bring up the low information on the bass to make it more audible, essentially. You know, just a little bit of upward compression there. Let's move on to the melodies. As you can see, there's not a lot happening with this song. It's actually very simple and straightforward. Yeah, we have this flute vamp. Again, we're starting with gain staging, making sure we have enough headroom to work with, and then using the EQs to carve out space as well as target resonant frequencies. Pretty much. And then I have the MV2 here as well, doing some upward compression and a little bit of downward compression on this particular instrument. Doing that for this flute because I felt like the dynamics was a little bit all over the place and I needed to even out the performance a little bit. But whenever I choose to do some compression on the instrument directly, I like to use the MV2 because sometimes just doing upward compression solves all my problems. And then we have the guitar in gain staging, and then EQs to carve out space and target resonant frequencies, especially around here. You can hear that ringing, right? Sounds smoother now. Actually, you know what? Let's do a quick bypass so we can hear the difference. So without it, and then with it. You know, it's more controlled now, which is great. And then what do we have here? Chorus guitar, and then yeah, as usual, gain staging, and then EQ to target resonant frequencies. For the low mid frequencies here, as you can see, I'm doing up to 96 dB octave slope to make sure I have a wide coverage of that low end. You know, but also this is strictly dynamic EQing so that we are not attenuating the frequencies that we don't need to attenuate. And then I have a doubler here to spread out this particular chorus guitar, and it makes sense for a chorus guitar because chorus guitar already has a chorus effect. This is just enhancing it and making it just surround the mix and give it presence essentially. So without the doubler, actually, this is what we get. It's nice, but with the doubler, it's full, it's round, it just surrounds you. And when you put this with the rest of the music, you know, it just sounds amazing. You know, every instrument has their own space like that. There's one more instrument here. Let's check that out real quick. What's that? So that's just the flute in the beginning. Gain staging, EQ to carve out space and target resonant frequencies. This particular instrument clearly needed that taming of the frequencies because of the sharp nature of the sound. You know, if I take this off now, you hear the difference. So without it, it's really sharp. Now it's a bit tame, you know, it's enjoyable. It's not going to hurt your ear when you listen to the song. And then we have this curves EQ here. I use this to get some nice EQ curves that I felt worked for this particular flute. And the curve EQ is actually doing some more attenuation and just a little boost around 866 Hertz. Right. All of this is really helping to control the sharpness of the flute. And as usual, all of this is going to my melody bus as well as the bass bus where I'm doing compression. So for the melody bus, leading up to -1 dB of gain reduction. Pretty much just to glue everything together, you know, make it sound like one giant instrument. And I'm also using the curves EQ here as well to shape the tone of the melody mix. You know, just a little bit of attenuation here and there and some boost. But this is set to the dynamic side, as you can see, to make sure we're getting a lot more dynamic processing rather than static. You know, just a little bit of enhancement. And then compression for the bass. This time around, I'm actually going up to -2 dB of gain reduction there. But I guess I thought I needed that for this record. But typically, I like to stay around -1. And the most I would go is -2. Again, that's just me. I'm not doing any saturation for the bass for this particular song because I felt like I liked the way the tone sounded. And it was already cutting across in the mix just the way I think it worked for the record. So that's that for the instrument. So let's look at the vocals real quick.
I cherish your name past gold and silver. When the trouble day, Jehovah deliver. My brother, if God cook for you, you know we finish am. Angels by my side, forever vigilant.
Right, so as usual, I like to start with gain staging a million times, right? And I'm using the UAD Auto-Tune real-time advanced for this particular song. I like the sound of this Auto-Tune, especially when I'm trying to do some auto-tuning that you don't particularly hear. My routine speed is set to 13. If I set routine speed at 13 for the waves tune, you would really hear the Auto-Tune sound, but you don't hear it with this particular plugin. And the rest of the processing is happening on the lead vocal chain. At the top of the vocal chain, we have the Clarity VX Pro, and then we have the catch-off EQ to target resting our frequencies.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Or dynamic EQ moves to make sure that we have a transparent sound. I'm going to leave a video here on dynamic EQ so you can see how to do this from scratch. And then we have the Nectar DS.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
You know, I've set this to capture sibilance from 3K and up. This stage I'm doing just a little bit of DS in, up to I think -2 dB.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
2.5 dB of gain reduction there, which is cool. It works for the song. And then the next plugin is the SSL channel strip, and we're using the EQ to shape the tone of the vocals.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Without the EQ, right? Let's hear that.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
With the EQ.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Let's put this in the mix without the EQ.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
With the EQ.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Like instantly the vocal is sitting in the mix. This plugin makes a huge difference to the chain, as you can hear. So let's look at what we're doing real quick. On the high frequencies, I'm doing a boost up to say 2 dB around 16K. For the high mid, I'm doing a cut up to say -2 dB around 3K with a very wide Q. This is to tame those sharpness around that 3K range essentially. And then for the low mid frequencies, I'm doing a cut up to say -14, -13 dB around say 750 Hertz, and also a wide Q. This low mid frequency Q moves actually helps the vocal to really sit properly in the mix, which is very, very nice. And then for the low frequency, we're doing a cut up to say -8 around 200 Hertz. Another reason I like this plugin is you don't exactly have numbers, so you have to use your ears to dial in what works for the song. Next plugin on the chain is the 1176 compressor. This is the first compressor in my chain because I like to compress in series. The purpose of the 1176 here is to just tame picks. I've set the attack to slow. This is slow mode, and this is a mode that is actually exclusively available to the Revision AE version of this compressor. Slow mode slows down attack time of the 1176 to about 10 milliseconds, I think. But again, what I'm trying to do here is target picks essentially.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
So as you can see, the needle is barely moving. That leads us into the C6 multiband compressor, and I'm using this to control the frequencies of the vocal and do some more tone shaping essentially.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Let's bypass it.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
And with it,
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
instant calmness, you know, and that's what you want. And if I put it in the mix,
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
and without it,
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
it's harsh,
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
calm. All right, so I'm going to leave a link here on how to use this so that you can try this. It's actually very, very cool. And then the next plugin on my chain is the LA2A, and this is where I even out the performance of the vocal and add as much gain as I need to help the vocal stand out in the mix.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Yeah, typically I always aim for around between -3 to -5 dB of gain reduction. Sometimes I'll go up to -7 if I want to get a very, 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 very compressed sound. But for this song, we're doing about, I think, -5 dB of gain reduction, and I've set my gain to taste. I don't level match, I just set my gain to taste based on what will work for the particular record.
I cherish your name past gold and silver. When the trouble day, Jehovah deliver.
Mad. And then the next plugin on the chain is the SPL de-esser, and this plugin is essentially what I use to capture any of the harshness that might have built up due to the processing that we've done, and also control how hot or warm I want the vocals to sound. For example, if I want it to sound a bit warmer, I'll just increase the S reduction.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
Right?
When the trouble day, Jehovah deliver. Brother, if God cook for you, you know we finish am.
I really like the tone that this de-esser has. It's very, very smooth and it's very, very soft, especially when it's warm, you know? It's quite nice.
I cherish your name past gold and silver.
And then we have all the time-based effects. We have the room reverb, our main reverb, and our stereo delay. I'm using the UAD pure plate for the room reverb. And then we're using the H reverb for our main reverb. My favorite comeback kit for our stereo delay. But there's also something I'm doing here. If you look at the main reverb, I'm doing a sidechain compression here.
I cherish your neighbors, gold and silver. When they trouble, they Jehovah deliver. My brother,
you know, just to make sure we have a bit more control of the reverb. So essentially, when the vocal plays, the reverb would duck down a little bit so the vocal can be more upfront, you know, essentially. And then the reverb comes after the vocal stops playing. It's quite nice. So that's that essentially. And if we go over to the background vocals, we're essentially doing the same thing.
no Lele.
I do have a doubler for this particular background vocal here.
Who just give to me?
Right.
Thunder from Eligwe answer you for me.
I like doing this a lot. Although I have chorus send on the background vocal bus, but sometimes I like to put it directly on the track. If I want that particular track to sound bigger, I just surround the lead like you can hear here.
Thief enjoyment Jesus give to me.
Right?
Thief enjoyment Jesus give to me. Thunder from Eligwe answer you for me. That's
You know, it's quite nice. The rest of the processing again is happening at the background vocal bus. For the panning, again, I'm just making my choices based on what I think work for the record. As you can see, I'm also balancing the levels based on what I think will work for the record. But as usual, I like to start with gain staging to make sure we have headroom, and then I put the auto-tune plugin directly on the track. For the background vocals, I'm using the wave tune. You know, I think that worked for this song. So for the background vocals, plugins is the same, just the settings will be a bit different as usual. Pretty much the EQ just a little bit different. I'm doing more cut on the low mid for the background vocals so that the vocals will sit into the mix a bit more. And as usual, before I actually hit the background vocal, I always like to go through my background sum in aux track to talk frequencies from 3K to about 7.5K when the lead is playing.
thief enjoyment Jesus give to me. Thunder from Eligwe answer you for me.
You know, essentially making the lead whenever they are playing together. The C6, yeah, a bit different. The processing is a bit different for the C6 as we have a bit more boost on the highs. So what I like to do most times is obviously put the background vocals in the mix, but then I increase the highs just a little bit so that even though the background vocals is tucked into the mix, it's still very audible essentially. And then as usual, I'm compressing just as much as I need, and I'm using my DSL as well to control the warmth of the vocals. One other thing that I mainly use to separate the lead from the background vocals is time-based effects. So if we look at the background vocals, you see that we have a very big reverb bus. So essentially, I'm using the bigger reverb for the background vocals. More reverb typically will send your vocals to the background. So that's just the idea behind that. And then I'm using a different delay for the background vocals as well. I'm using the Nectar delay. 8-note delay, but it's just a quick delay to give the background vocals some character.
Who just give to me? Thunder from Eligwe answer you for me.
Okay, hear that? Me. We have an ad-lib bus, and I've routed some of the ad-lib tracks to that bus as well.
Who just give to me?
Like this one, right? I'm also using a very big reverb bus here, so there's more reverb as well, and I'm using stereo delay for this one as well. The rest of the processing again is just similar, just a little bit different to set them apart to make sure nobody's kind of competing against each other for space in the frequency range. For the vocals, that's that for the mix. Let's go over to the mastering chain real quick. I don't think there's anything else I need to touch on. So as usual, the very top of the chain, we have the V meter. Right, so again, I'm just making sure I don't stay on the red, you know, just to make sure I have headroom before I proceed down the rest of the chain. And then we have ozone 11. Essentially, what I do with this is use the first EQ to do a bit of search and taming for resonant frequencies in the entire mix. So the last cleaning process before I proceed down the rest of the chain. And then I have an EQ here. I always like to do this 1 dB boost around 60 Hz for most records, not every record. You know, just to add a bit more punch to the low end. You know, essentially. and then I have the E major. So the way I like to use the E major is split into 4 crossover points. Okay, so the first one is from 8K and up, second one is from 1.8K to 8K, 102 to 1.8K. This would be like my mid/low mid frequencies. This would be like my high mid, and this would be very high frequencies essentially. I like to do more stereo widening on the very high frequencies from 10K and up, as you can see. Little bit of stereo widening from 1.8K to 8K. I do not touch the low mid or the mid, however you're gonna call it. If I feel like I need to make it wider around this frequency range, I'll go into the mix and pan instruments essentially. And then for the low frequencies, everything from 102 and below, I just narrow that into mono to give me a tighter low end. And then we have the SPL PQ, where I do the final tone shaping for the entire song. I'm doing a -1 dB attenuation around 220 Hz. Right? 2 dB boost around 61 Hz. I don't do anything to the mid frequencies. I'm doing a 1 dB boost around 2.6K to add snappiness to all of the snares and rims and stuff. And then 2 dB boost around, what's that, 18 kilohertz to just add shine to the entire record. Let's bypass it so we can hear the difference. So without this EQ. And then with the EQ. I mean, it sounds very delicious. That's all I can say. And then the next plugin on the chain is the SPL Ion. This is where we glue the entire record together. The target is typically -1 dB of gain reduction. Typically more than enough to do that. Very fast release and very slow attack. And I like to do high pass sidechain filter as well. So I've set that to 91 Hz, which means the compressor is going to be triggered by frequencies above 90 Hz. And then I've set the mono maker to fold down everything below 80 Hz. Yeah, 80 Hz to mono. Again, this is to ensure that we have a very tight low end. And then the next plugin on the chain is a black box for some saturation. I like to set this to flat so I have saturation across the frequency range. And then my setup is very simple. Saturation is 50, going to pentode at 50, triode 50. The mix is also set to 50. That way I'm doing parallel processing with the black box saturator essentially. I'm not adding any air for this particular song because I felt like the song was already very airy. So no air from the black box essentially. And then we have the BX clipper, some soft clip. And I typically just target about a maximum of 2 dB of gain reduction with the clipper. You know, that's just to make things easy for the limiter. So let's go over to the limiter real quick. And we're using the newfangled Elevate as usual. Right, so that's about what, 3.8 dB. I guess maybe we'll probably be getting to about -4 dB of gain reduction with the limiter at some point in the record. And this is giving us around -7 dB LUFS and true peak of -0.4 dB true peak, which is great. We have a loud master, we have a clean master, we have everything that we need. For the limiter though, I like to always set the speed to around 3.5 milliseconds. So it's not quite slow, but it's also not the fastest. And the ceiling is set to -0.5 dB with the true peak limiting turned on. And that's how I'm able to get my true peak at -0.4 dB. Transient emphasis is set to 70%, so we get more snap on the transient. This is my favorite limiter. You should try it out. You know, it sounds very good. I think after this is the L4. I've used the new L4 on some other records that I mixed recently, and I like the way they sounded. So yeah, man, that's it. That's everything we've done for this record. And as usual, I hope this was beneficial. And if you'd like to get my vocal preset for FL Studio, Logic Pro, and Pro Tools, as well as my mixing and mastering template for Logic Pro and Pro Tools, I'm going to leave a link below where you can get them. And if you'd like to book my services for mixing and mastering, I'm going to leave a link below to the engineers page as well. Or you can hit me up on Instagram at BennyMacaulayDB. And by the way, I've received a lot of DMs and comments from you guys asking for Ableton vocal preset. So that's also going to be dropping this week. I collaborated with my amazing friend / genius / all-round great guy Godwin Guitar to create an amazing Afrobeat vocal preset for Ableton users. So yeah, man, that's it for this one. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 10K. It'd be nice to get to 10K for the year ends. You know, that'd be nice. And I'll probably do a giveaway once I hit 10K. I think I should. By the way, don't expect to see me wearing suit in the next video. This is because I'm coming from an event and I decided I must make the video today. So that's it for now. I shall see you on the next one. But Macaulay out.
Na wana na wana moso.